Just take a moment to, this was going to be presenters or whatnot, but from the Native American tribes who gathered resources in the area for millennia to the bustling park that exists on the land today. A wide variety of groups have found meaning and importance in the mountain now called Mount Rainier. All of these groups mapped their values on the landscape and contributed to a broader sense of what the area should be. Though these values were often very different and sometimes conflicted, they are all held together today in a delicate balance by the park. The mountain is a product of its past in more than just a geologic sense. Understanding the human history of Mount Rainier is crucial to realizing the intricacy of the mountain today. What I'd like to do is introduce Renate as a permanent staff employee of the archaeology team here at Mount Rainier National Park.
Yeah. Later, after I talk, I have some show and tell. Everybody loves show and tell. Right. I could probably. Yeah, we'll figure it out. Yes, so I am an archaeologist here at Mount Rainier. This is I'm in a weird, not seasonal, not yet a permanent position, but this is my third season here. So, yeah. First off, what is archaeology? Can anyone tell me? Anybody know what archaeology is?
Looking for artifacts.
Okay, looking for artifacts, but okay, that gets into, well, that was gonna be my next question, but what, okay, I'm looking for artifacts, but like, what is an artifact? What is the purpose of archaeology? What is
How
archaeology?
about the study of human interaction with the environment through the years?
Yeah, there you go. So yeah, archaeology is a study of past human cultures through landscapes, artifacts, written records, and oral histories. We study both ancient and recent human past. Yeah, sorry, got thrown off. But yeah, basically the study of past human cultures and behaviors, where our interest is in people and how they interacted here at Mount Rainier, or how they interacted with this landscape. So you mentioned artifacts. What is an artifact? Getting a little ahead of myself. But well, if we're studying human behaviors, it is things that people have interacted with or modified. So here in North America, archaeology is broken down into two broad categories, and we consider it pre-contact and historic archaeology. Pre-contact archaeology is related to Native Americans. Vocabulary is always evolving. Most people hear it as prehistoric, but that is because it is a Eurocentric viewpoint that if a history is not written down, it doesn't exist. I think these terms will continue to evolve because pre-contact is still centralizing the Euro-American experience, but that's what the current terms that we use, just to kind of like break it down and think about it conceptually. So what is an artifact? We already talked about that. So anything made, modified, or used by humans. And can someone give me an example? Spearhead.
A wall.
Arrow points.
Arrow points. You said a wall?
Yep.
Yep, a wall. Absolutely. It's made.
What's found in the bottom of a fire pit?
Stuff at the bottom of the fire pit.
Same way we're saying cookware.
Cookware. Yeah, all of that. So for here in terms of like the study that we do, we give it a broad anything older than 50 years old. gets put into a category as an artifact and requires more investigation on my end. So you talked about things that move around, spear points, arrowheads, and then things that didn't move around, walls, and maybe a fire pit. So anything that is non-portable, we actually call feature. And as you can hear, this is a soil profile, and you can see a little, the soil going indenting, that would be a feature. So for archaeology, one item is an artifact. More than one item, and we get into different categories, becomes an archaeological site. More than one item and also features then make an archaeology site. Got it going on. And for me, the most important thing is context. Honestly, one single artifact is meaningless to me. We can get a little bit of information about it depending on the material, what it is, the completeness of it. But the most important part is actually context, where it was found. Where it was found either vertically or horizontally in the landscape. What it was found nearby. That gives us more information. Like I said, we study human behavior. One shiny artifact just tells us one tiny part of the story. So context is the most important thing. Here at Mount Rainier, you're talking about geological history. We are pretty lucky that our soils have been heavily studied, and we can do relative dating based on the location in the soil. We call that stratigraphy, and we have all the layers dated. We even have areas of the soil dated to the eruption of Mount Zama, which is Crater Lake. So context, that's what I care about. So here's an example. If we find an artifact anywhere like in the depth and it doesn't look like it's been disturbed, we can relatively date it. So we have areas where there's Mount Zama. There's been a bunch of eruptions of Mount St. Helens and Mount Rainier. And so I really care about context. And that's where you come in terms of visitor interactions. Visitors like to report things that they see. Sometimes they like to pick things up. I really like to stress, leave things in place. Because again, the context is the most important. I might already know about the archaeology site. We have several hundred archaeology sites recorded here at Mount Rainier, and so I might already know about it. It's been mapped, and part of the mapping is knowing exactly where individual things are, or I might not know about it. Because believe it or not, all of Mount Rainier National Park has not been surveyed. So I kind of, I've been talking this year to all the different work groups of like, you're our eyes and our ears. Like, if you see something, just tell me about it, because then I can do some more investigation on it. Do you have a question?
Oh no, I was holding my head.
Okay, just wanted to make sure. So, why we do what we do. This is, I'll move quickly through this. Why is an archaeologist here at Mount Rainier?
Learn advanced history. A long history of human habitation and interaction.
Yep, there's a long history. Or were you saying something else?
I was trying to be funny, like you love your job.
I love my job, yeah. But why is the government paying my salary? Actually, so this is I'll go real quickly through this. Laws. So we have several laws, and I don't need to go all into them, but it all started with the Antiquities Act of 1906, which was protecting archaeology sites and artifacts on federal land. We also have the National Historic Preservation Act of 1966, and that's where you're not really in all the circles, but a lot of people reference Section 106. That is 90% of our job is compliance, and Section 106 comes from that law. We have the Archaeological Resource Protection Act 1979, ARPA, and that gives criminal penalties to people who loot and destroy archaeological sites. And then this was also briefly touched upon, the Native American Graves Protection Repatriation Act of 1990, NAGPRA. And that is a big one that is still in effect today. You're like, 1990? I was like, kind of a while ago now, kind of not. It requires federal agencies to return human remains and associated grave and items of cultural patrimony back to groups. And it's still a big thing happening right now of returning these items. So, laws, that's why I'm here. But because unfortunately, while we are really interested in finding out more things, there's not any money for research. And all the money is in compliance. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. So what work happens here at Mount Rainier? What am I doing on a day-to-day type of thing? One thing that happens is survey. There's going to be projects, and some of the survey requires walking and transects, and that's set at a bearing and a certain distance apart to cover the ground. So yes, archaeologists do go off trail. Try not to stomp all over the flowers, but depending on what the project is, we're sometimes off trail.
Yeah, but you have a permit, right?
I have a uniform that it's kind of like a permit. So site testing and excavation. This is what people think of when you think of an archaeologist, but this is actually more rare because archaeology is a destructive science. To find out the information, we are destroying the intact part of it as we're doing it, which is why we spend a lot of time recording things. But this doesn't happen a lot. Most of the time I'm doing pedestrian survey. I'm walking over areas, walking on trails. But some of the projects that happen, there's going to be ground disturbance. So we want to predict or see if we need to more actively monitor the project when it's happening. And we'll do something like on the right-hand side, we call it a shovel test pit. And then if it's a bigger project or if we have found things in a shovel test pit, we then move on to the bigger units, which are 1 meter by 1 meter units. Another thing, reported finds. Again, that's where I've been talking to groups and even to volunteers. Reported finds. People, either workers or members of the public, finding things. We go out. So these are pictures of things that we have actually been reported to us. A bed frame. Maintenance was cleaning up around the picnic area here at Paradise, and they're just picking up garbage, and then all of a sudden they're like, oh, maybe this garbage is a little bit older. In the middle, an enamel pitcher was found moved to the head of the St. Andrews trailhead. And then trails told us about a tire down in the riverbed, and so we had to go down and see if it was older than 50 years old, which it was. More reported finds. Re-veg is working at Paradise, and because we talked to them, they knew what to look out for, and this base piece of obsidian was found in one of their holes for re-veg. And this was like a really big deal because all of the knowledge that the Native American groups are telling us and what they know of is that hunting wasn't really happening here at Paradise. That was kind of not really happening. So this is actually a base of a projectile point, and it's obsidian, which is also even more rare because there are no sources of obsidian here at Mount Rainier. So we're actually working with them and doing further testing to find out the source of this obsidian. And this was just last year. Other reported finds, this glass bottle trail crew, a volunteer crew, they were doing the trail and then they're like, oh, we found some glass. It was in these tree roots. Luckily I had talked to Trails and their supervisor was like, wait, you found it in the tree roots? That this tree fell over? That means it's probably not modern. And in fact, it was not. It was a whiskey bottle. And then a lot of what people think that I do, monitoring for the excavations, either related to rehabbing housing around the park or replacing water and sewer and electrical lines. That is a lot of the work the last couple of years. It's continuing at the Paradise parking lot. Someday, I'm waiting to monitor. But we are out there monitoring when the big excavators are out there. And office work. So here at Mount Rainier, this is a picture obviously of artifacts and cleaning and processing. We have a policy of not collecting things unless they're found where the context is disturbed, so when those excavations are happening with the excavator. And if they have the probability of getting stolen or some environmental factor, something's going to impact them. But part of our office work, if we do collect any artifacts, is cleaning them, cataloging them, and processing them for curation. Here at Mount Rainier, we have our own curation facility at Tahoma Woods, and they have a lot of stuff going on. And then we also have to red report about all of our stuff. So we do a lot of office work on top of all the field work. We say a rule of thumb is 1 hour in the field is about 3 hours in the office. Depending on the project, it can be a lot more. So just a tiny overview of summing up some pre-contact archaeology here. We have, with our Western science, have documented about 8,500 years of human presence here at Mount Rainier. Most of the pre-contact sites are of seasonal occupation, because you think about how we interact with the mountain. It's more seasonal than year-round. And most pre-contact sites are in the subalpine zones. And now that could be a factor of environmental conditions and things like that, or also a factor of where we're looking, how we're looking, when we're looking. Historical archaeology. As already mentioned, Mount Rainier was established in 1899. I said archaeology artifacts are older than 50 years old. So a lot of work that we do is actually on the development of the park itself. Not even the Western colonizers coming in before the park, but actually the park development itself. So we have Longmire, old pictures. We actually have great resources at the curation facility. We have photos, we have engineering drawings, we have so many resources. Longmire, Ahanapakosh, we have Paradise, older picture of Paradise. There's some displays about how this new building was put in. They did a scramble archaeology job because they found out that it was partially on the footprint of an old building that had been demolished. And then Sunrise. Do you recognize this area at Sunrise? This is a photo I stumbled across. Back in the day, they had a bunch of tent platforms where employees lived, but that's not there now. So there's a high potential, if we're doing work, we can look at these old photos. There's a high potential of finding things based on just knowing it's there. So what are we looking for? I talked about this a little bit. What do you think are things we are looking for here at Mount Rainier? What type of specific artifacts do you think we're surveying?
Anything related to the natives?
Yep. So we've got peel trees. The groups here in the Pacific Northwest use cedar for so many different uses. And we are continually finding more of these trees of where they peeled off the bark. Projectile points and other stone tools. So I like to use the term projectile point because not everything was an arrowhead. It could have been a spearhead. It could have been a dart point. Also, a lot of tools are not just projectile points, but also like think about the different things you need to do. You need to cut things, you need to scrape things. So these are all different types of stone tools. And that was actually a stone tool found at an archaeology site around here at Mount Rainier where everything was supposed to have been collected, but there was something still there.
Question.
Yes.
My understanding of the peel trees is that they understood that if they peeled off the cedar for the baskets off of the whole tree, the tree would die.
No. So actually the harvesting techniques, depending on what they needed to do it, because they also use cedar trees for canoe bark, but the peels are not all the way around a tree. They are peeling certain sections so that they can peel it and not kill the entire tree.
Right, that's what I mean. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I think I misunderstood. Like,
In another one, these stone tools look like they're from a wide variety of locations. Is that your opinion?
yeah,
The obsidian?
I don't think that that particular example is things from here at Mount Rainier. It was just like
Oh,
a good example of like of stuff. But yeah, I really only know specific details about specific sites that I've worked on and specific areas, and so you can imagine I haven't worked on that many sites, even though I've been here for 3 years. But we do have, from certain sites I have worked on, we have a wide range of material, which we can get into. It gets a little specific, but like chert and obsidian and basalt. Because we do have basalt sources. Basalt is a giant umbrella. Here we have andesite and maybe some other things happening. I'm not the best at naming materials.
But when you have artifacts that are from materials not here, that's an indication of trade relationships, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And most, not most, because again, I don't know about every site here. Quite a few things that I have been on have been materials that are not from here. People are either trading or coming from other places and coming here. Especially the obsidian. That's like the big, it's also the easiest to recognize. It's kind of like the shiny thing, and it's like a really big deal.
So that's contact between other tribes, between tribes.
Either contact between tribes or those tribes coming here.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. One site that I worked on last year has been excavated since like the 90s, and some of the sources of obsidian came from 4 different areas. 2 in other parts of Washington and 2 or 3, I said 4, but there might have been 5, but 2 or 3 areas in Oregon, and this was found like here, so.
So the idea is they didn't live in isolation.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, historic stuff, bottles, those are glacier glasses, tobacco tin. Yeah, so these are all awesome examples. But what we actually find on the day-to-day, little pieces. So when you're making a stone tool, you start out with a big hunk of rock and then you break it down. And the things that come off are called flakes. That's basically the garbage of making the tool. That flakes are mostly what we find. I have never found here a whole projectile point, and will probably not find one. Broken pieces of glass. This is actually, again, referencing Paradise and some garbage. That just looks like broken pieces of glass, but based on some of the maker's marks on this is actually from a pickle jar from a company out of Tacoma, like in the early 20s and 30s. And pieces of bricks, and our favorite, rusty metal bits. So that's a more representative sample of things that I find. Little pieces of rock pieces, we call them lithics, little pieces of lithics, the flakes. Unknown metal pieces, broken glass. But depending on the item itself, and then again, the context, I can tell a little bit more. Also, the internet is a wonderful resource. I use the internet all the time to research historic things. This is an example of different projects we work on. So I work on trail maintenance, the Skyline Trail reroute, revegetation. Frying Pan Creek Bridge is going to be replaced in the next couple of years. We had to do some testing to see if that would impact archaeology sites. Talked about Paradise Picnic utility monitoring, Tipsy Picnic Area rehabilitation, Camp Muir. I got paid to sleep on a glacier. And work at Ohanapakash Campground. Things that have been found. Rehabbing the White River Ranger Station. Underneath the floorboards, they found cut bones. It's like they're just throwing the garbage under there. I did some survey. We're going to do working with the USGS. There's going to be new lahar detection systems, and those are like way off in the wilderness and spots that people can't see. I had to go and survey the areas of where they were anticipating putting in those spots. So that's one survey spot there. There is, not everything is glamorous. That is actually an archaeology site of some trash at Ptolemy Peak Lookout. Can't really see in the picture, but it's full of rusty cans and some burned batteries and other modern trash too. Excavations by the Nisqually House. We found another trash dump. The Nisqually House is where the first superintendent lived, and we believe that this trash is from him and his family. We found like a lunchbox, but what was really cool is he had a family. We know that he brought his family here, but nobody talks about kids or wives. But we found toothpaste and Brett's and like a little toy, so that's pretty cool. Toothpaste. And this is like monitoring the installation of one of the USGS sites at Sunrise by the weather station. Some monitoring, again, like having to do a more focused archaeological dig in the middle of the trench and then watching things at Tipsu. Fix that. And this is my whole big thing this year, what to do if you or the public finds an artifact. Leave it in place, because, like I said, context. Record the location and setting and take a photo if you can, if it is possible. And then, like, don't post the picture on social media. And just kind of thinking about it in terms of, we're asking for, like, take a GPS point if you can. Or think about, how did you get to that location? Can you retrace your steps? Because then you're going to communicate it to someone in your group, and then they're going to communicate it to us, and then we're going to have to go out and look and see, again, if it's something we already know about or if it's something new. Inform a ranger, contact the archaeology department. Ben Diaz is the park archaeologist, tribal coordinator, and Section 106 specialist. He wears a lot of hats. And also myself, Renate Beyer. And these are some examples of sheets that other parks have, but we don't seem to have. I put them up before because I thought we had them, but it turns out that we don't. But these are MPS publications, trying to get some of these printed out. And all these say are, again, leave things in place. If you take something, it's kind of the same concept of like flowers or rocks. If you take one thing, and then everybody takes something, then nothing's left. And then this is the 2022 Archaeology Department. We have Ben, myself, Emma, and Sally. So you might be seeing our faces. And then, yeah, any questions? I know it's all warm in here.
I'm going to go ahead and trade out and just show a quick presentation for an archaeological project at Ohanapakash several years ago.
And then after this presentation, you can look at my box of goodies.
Maybe not. Let's see.
I will add. So things, especially with what you are doing out there on the trails with people, the question is this an artifact or is this garbage? And that's a very important question, especially like I gave examples. And at least on the trails, the way I like to think about it is just like take a step back and think, is this something that I myself or people today are taking in their packs? Like, are people really hiking up with glass bottles of beer? Probably not. Are people hiking up with dinner plates? There are dinner plates up there in paradise. No. I have specific examples of cans. So cans might be taking up, but like the technology of drinks in cans has evolved over time. And if it's not something that you are actively using in this year, the last 5 years, even the last 10 years, normally to the younger groups I say, maybe it's something your grandparents used, but maybe it was something you used when you were younger. Like, just like, that's how I like to conceptualize it. Like, is it trash? Is it garbage? Plastics, a lot of plastics, just garbage. We're starting to enter into the phase where plastic is turning 50 years old. But for the most part, I'm like, oh, if it's plastic, it's probably garbage. Glass bottles, with my examples, there might be a throwback soda bottle, but the technology, and I have a bottle for you to touch, is like so different. Older glass is just really heavy and not as thin as modern glass. I say the hardest one is probably brown bottle glass, because brown beer bottle glass has not changed in that much. But yeah, just think about what you're carrying in your pack, and that's a good rule of thumb. And if you think it might be old garbage, just let somebody know, and then I will look at it and be able to be like, oh no, let's throw this in the trash. Okay, get out of the way.
My name is Greg Burchard. I'm the archaeologist here at Mount Rainier National Park. I also coordinate Indian relations with the park. We're standing here in Ohanapakash Campground at the southeast corner of Mount Rainier National Park, in which we've got an archaeological site that I think is of some importance to the park. So we've got about 110 archaeological properties documented all around the mountain, dating to as early as 9,000 years ago. We've got this is a site map a working site map of Ohanapakash Campground, southeast corner of Mount Rainier National Park. In 2014, we were fortunate enough to have the opportunity to do archaeological testing in advance of the utility line route that was replacing an older one that was about 40 or 50 years old, aging. In advance of that route, we were excavated constant volume samples, the system we call constant volume sampling, which essentially uses a special incurved handled post hole digger that allows us to dig 30-centimeter diameter holes at a consistent diameter, perfectly nice cylinders, down to about 1.5 meters. Along that route, everywhere you see a red dot on this map, along the road line, around the road edges, you can see the campground road loops, and into the campground facilities, restroom areas, power boxes, things like that. This, by the way, is the Ohanapakash River, and these are the various campground loops in the campground. In the process of doing that, we located our first 4 low-elevation archaeological sites, pre-contact archaeological sites ever recorded on Mount Rainier. So finding 4 sites intact, in situ, at a low-elevation place where none had ever been documented before, nor was any indication of presence here on the surface at that time, was a big deal. And so working off of that success from last year, the park has authorized us to sample the landscape now more broadly to see if the pattern that we observed the utility lines is general to the landscape as a whole. So what we did in that process was set up a grid system. Everywhere there's a cross was an excavation point where we did constant volume sampling, and in the process of doing that, isolated a series of about 20 more positive units that had chipstone tool remains at varying depths. One reason that this works is that stone tools for piercing and cutting and scraping work well. It makes a fine, sharp edge. The problem is that they break a lot. It's very fragile, it's brittle. So for us, that's handy because in the process of repairing and refurbishing these tools, which has to be done daily, people in the past generate a rain or a deposit of this chipped stone tool remains where they've been repaired. And even though the tools themselves are saved and taken away, they still leave behind enough of the repair material that we can identify where people sat in the past and did these things. So what we do then in these samples sampling system is to separate the intact the in situ sediments from toolstone materials. These are cherts and obsidians, things like that.
So here at this area of the site, what we initially did is we opened up a little constant volume sample in the corner, and when that turned out to be positive, after doing several others in the area, we decided to expand on that area. So first we excavated a 1 meter by 1 meter square unit with quarries standing in at this time. And we had pretty good results from that. The recovery pretty much matched what we had found in the constant volume sample. And we also recovered one tool from there. We also noticed as we excavated that the stratigraphic layers, the layers of different ash falls that have built up over time that formed this campground, were fairly intact, had not been disturbed too much by the forest that's grown up here over the last thousands of years. And so that made us really want to expand on that unit, because the less disturbance we have, the better idea we have of exactly where in that profile of different ash layers that the artifacts are coming from. And we have a better chance of finding them kind of where they were dropped at that time.
So what I'm doing now is I'm just skimming a real thin amount of dirt off of the test unit at a time. And we skim just really small amounts so that hopefully we can find artifacts in place, and then that gives us more information as to the time frame that they came from. So after I skim the dirt off, we bucket it and go sift the dirt in the screening area over there, and then anything that's found in the screen is bagged for this particular level that we're in.
And we're testing a number of the locations across the Hanfakash area in which we have positive results. So this is another test unit.
These are flakes that we found today, and then sometimes we collect rocks that kind of look like they might be flakes, and we can look at those more closely later. So we're getting maybe about like 12 to 20 flakes per level.
What happened was right above that Mount Rainier ash, we found a diagnostic artifact, a temporally diagnostic artifact, which was pretty exciting. So this is what would have been the base of a spear or dart-sized point. And a similar one was found at an archaeological site not far from here. And then this is about where it would fit on that complete point. So it's just the base, the hefting element of the point. This style of point is generally associated with earlier occupations in this area. And finding this point style helps us kind of more firmly establish that this is an early site. All of these points are from a fairly early site that was excavated nearby, probably with an age range somewhere between 7,300 and 7,900 years old.
So right now, our working interpretation is that folks moved seasonally up into high elevation landscapes along various routes into Mount Rainier, with this being one of them, making short-term stops along the river on the way up to higher elevation ground where folks were seasonally gathering resources and used to them. Huckleberries, marmots, mountain beaver, glacier lily, elk, mountain goats, perhaps foremost of all, things that aren't available in low elevation landscapes, bringing them back. The modern representatives of people who've been in this area for a very long period of time are still here. They have different names. They have names that were applied by treaties, but they include such groups around Mount Rainier as the Nisqually Indian tribe, the Puyallup tribe of Indians, the Muckleshoot Indian tribe, the Confederated Tribes and Bands of the Yakama Nation, the Cowlitz Indian tribe, Squaxin Island Indian tribe, and others that reside in this vicinity that were signatories to various treaties, and some didn't sign treaties, but those folks are still here. Their ancestors were here before them, and this makes folks aware. I hope this helps make people aware that Native American people aren't just an artifact of the last 200 years or of the treaties, that they have a past that goes on for a very long period of time, and that they used landscapes like Mount Rainier through much of that period of time, for at least 9,000 years.
So, again, I just really want to thank all of you for coming today and participating in what I would consider some of our cultural resources that we don't always get a chance to talk about. Especially for those of us who are rovers, we tend to talk more about the natural resources. But it's really great to have this sense of how things have changed over time. I mean, as Cassandra talked to us about the timeline for Indians in the United States, and Kevin talked to us a little bit more about Mount Rainier National Park in particular, and then Renate sharing some of the information about archaeology here at the park. So hopefully this was a worthwhile presentation for you.